just, if you would silence your phones, that would be awesome. Also, both speakers have said it was okay to record, so if you want to record on your phones, that'd be okay with it.
Brian, we're going to start with you opening.
Okay, well, let me kind of set the table for tonight. Let me level set the things we're going to agree on, so we can just talk about the things that we don't agree on. The things we agree on is we all hit the lottery growing up and living in Nebraska. So let's start with that. The second piece is really, the question is, are property taxes too high? And that's a yes from both sides. The question is, what are our property tax issues? Recently, and I would say in the last 5 to 10 years, it's particularly a problem in terms of valuations. If you're like we are, so I've had double-digit valuations on my house the last 4 cycles. And that's common almost in every city across the state. And it's a function of, there's a massive appreciation in home values, and even greater appreciation in apartment values. So there's massive speculation in farmland. Generally, farmland, I assume here, like most places in the state, actually sells for more than its appraised value whenever it comes up for auction. And in housing across Nebraska, we've had insufficient housing starts. There is insufficient housing stock in almost every community in the state. There isn't much turnover, and as a consequence, housing prices have gone up, valuations have gone up, and valuations are going up much faster than our economic income. And so with that, everybody looks at valuations and says, what are we going to do? And so when we go around the state, property taxes is a serious issue. It's a serious issue for our chamber members. The only question to debate tonight is, how do we fix it? And I'll talk a little bit now just to give you the summary of what I'm going to talk about in terms of why I don't think EPIC is the fix. It is fair to ask the question, so what is the fix? I assume that Steve, the moderator, or somebody's going to ask that question. In brief, and I know we'll get into it in more detail, what EPIC proposes, it's pretty simple. The EPIC proponents are using a constitutional amendment, which they hope, 2 constitutional amendments, which they hope to get on the ballot in November. And they're really simple. The first one adds a new section of the Nebraska Constitution, which says, notwithstanding any other provision of the Constitution, beginning January 1, 2026, so this would start in 2026, no government entity in the state of Nebraska, meaning no state or local government entity, including schools, could impose taxes other than retail consumption taxes or excise taxes. That means the elimination of all other taxes, income taxes, property taxes, you name it. And the only thing that we could have in Nebraska is, at both the state and local level, is consumption taxes or excise taxes. The second amendment basically states that it's a similar amendment, only this constitutional amendment creates through section 15, and it says that the state of Nebraska shall, under this new constitutional authority, impose a retail consumption tax or an excise tax on all new goods and services. And the legislature may authorize political subdivisions, meaning local and county and schools and whatever, to do the same. So you could have both the state consumption tax and a local consumption tax. And then it goes on to say there shall be no exemption from such taxes except for grocery items purchased for off-premises consumption. So this is a constitution of Nebraska which the legislature must follow, which would say the only taxes we could raise other than excise taxes would be consumption taxes, retail consumption taxes on all goods and services, with only one exemption being groceries. And so then the question and the difficulty in all this is one of the first issues, is it's really hard to write tax law in a constitutional amendment. In 2 paragraphs, to state all the issues. So first of all, what is a retail consumption tax? Well, the Supreme Court interprets Nebraska tax laws to say it is what it means. So retail consumption tax is clearly on the consumption of new goods and services. But what is retail? Well, generally speaking, economists have a definition for retail, tax lawyers have definitions for retail. They're not all that exact, but basically, you're either selling retail or you're selling wholesale. If you're selling big quantities of stuff to be resold, that's wholesale. If you're selling a few items, it's retail. Particularly if it looks like you're a retailer with a front window on the side and you're selling onesies and twosies. Nowhere in this does it say we're taxing only retail sales to individuals. In the constitutional amendment, I'm not talking about the legislation that's been produced, I'm talking about the constitutional amendment. Nowhere does it say we're only taxing individuals. So clearly, a retail sale, just as an example, when I go buy a new pickup with an F-150, I hope I got that right. If I buy a new F-150, I'm an individual, I would pay this consumption tax. Does a retail consumption tax apply when a farmer goes and buys one combine at deer pays the deal? Is that a retail transaction, or is that a wholesale transaction? Opponents will say, well, no, so you got it wrong, that's not intended, it's only for tax on individual consumption. Constitution will say it's retail consumption tax on all new goods and services. Even a 7-8% tax on $1 million combine, you sort of get the picture. Now, in fairness to proponents, that's not what they intend. What I'm saying is, to do this in a constitutional amendment is really, really hard. You can't boil this stuff down to one paragraph. And it says there's only one exemption. Will all businesses pay taxes on all their new goods and services, and does it apply to inventories, or only when you sell it? None of this is clear. You can't write it in a paragraph. Nobody could have. The second issue that we'll talk about tonight is they'll talk about dynamic scoring. And we have to raise an out with this proposal that replaces all the other taxes. So let's say it's 11 or 12 billion by 2026, probably 12 billion. About 6 billion of state taxes and 6 billion of local taxes. Well, to raise it, they have an economic study, and we'll talk about it in detail tonight. But our current sales tax, which is generally only goods, not all services, only raises less than $3 billion. So how much more do you have to add to get to 11 billion? There aren't enough services sold to individuals to get there. In fact, there's not enough income made by the individuals of Nebraska to create the tax base on a 7 or 8% sales tax to get to the numbers that are required. What's built into the economic report, we'll talk about later, is it also intends to tax, at least from the economist standpoint, all social services and nonprofit services to individuals. Welfare payments, and also government services, eventually Medicare and Medicaid. Because that's what the economists put in their assumptions. The other parts of their assumptions is they assume massive growth. Massive growth. In the first year, they expect 47,000 people to move to Nebraska because they're so excited about the epic growth. Okay? These are the assumptions by the economists, and I'm not blaming the proponents, these are just economists. But the assumptions in the study create a massive amount of taxes. It simply won't happen on day one. Now, at a federal government level, you can do this because they can deficit spend. The state level, we can't. If we end up 3 billion or 5 billion short on day one, then we default. We default our school bonds, we default on all our debts, and we have to cut 2 or 3 billion on services. And so we'll talk about it in more detail. I'm running to the end. The other two pieces we'll talk about tonight are really how much litigation will be this created, what will be lost, and two, the loss of local control. Because this is a proposal to send all your dollars to Lincoln and have Lincoln decide how much they spend on gold. And so I think the proponents are well intended. We absolutely have to fix property tax. This is just not.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, Mark, we're ready for you.
Thank you. I want to welcome everyone for being here tonight. This is what the constitutional republic is all about. Coming in here to pay and seeing for yourself what's the information and what do I want to take home and what decisions do I want to make. So, as mentioned, I've been on the road a little bit, having delivered over 50 of these presentations. So I just want to start with a couple of things that I've learned as I've been on the road. Number one, of course, we all learned that we were supposed to have a government of, by, and for the people. Unfortunately, today, we have a government that's of the people, by the people, but for the government. And why do I say that? Because they can send you any type of property tax increases they want to and never ask permission up front. Okay? So that's a really important factor that we want to make this now by and for the people. And that's what Epic Option will do. I also I could tell you hundreds of stories of people that I've talked to in the 51 town hall meetings I presented, but I'll just shoot these three because they cover the entire state of Nebraska. My hometown is Sydney. I'm a former wheat farmer. I go out there and I talk to the guys who are my age who are retired, and they say, Mark, you can't believe how bad the taxes are. You can't believe how much pain they cause me. Tell me, Mark, if I have a really good crop and I have good prices, and I take my one per landlord share and I sell it, and then I pay my property taxes, the only money I had left was to buy one banana split. That's it. You're talking to a man who, he and his wife worked hard for 20 or 30 years, paid their mortgage payments. They own 2 sections of ground, and out their land is only worth $1,300 an acre compared to $5,000 or $6,000 it's valued at here. So he's worth $1.6 million. That is a crime that a man worth $1.6 million, okay, after he sells his taxes, gets zero return on his investment. Second story, 74-year-old woman did a great job of waiting on me in Heber, Nebraska. Paid for my sandwich, she handed it to me, and then she pointed right at my chest, just like this. She says, is that the same epic sign that I see out south of town that Fort Hood Lane puts on? Yes, ma'am. Oh, I hope you get that done. Where do I sign the petition? I'm 74 years old. I'm working full time. I'd like to slow down to just working 2 days a week. And then I got my tax statement in the mail, and now with the increases, I'm going to have to keep working full time, or we're going to have to move out of my house. That is sad. The people who lived in a home for 30 or 40 years, now in the golden ages, and they can't continue to stay there. Why? Because the property taxes just keep going up and up. And finally, O'Neill, Nebraska, 4th generation rancher, my age, 45 miles south and west of Atkinson, has a beautiful ranch. He says, Mark, I have a terrible dilemma. When I started ranching 50 years ago, said I would pay $17,000 a year property taxes on my 400 head cow-calf operation. Today I pay $51,000. Mark, that $30,000 difference is what I raised my family on all those years. I cannot in good conscience invite either one of my sons who's doing really well in the city to come home and to take over this ranch from me because they have no money on which to raise their family. This is our current system. $1,271 pages is what the tax code is. That's 56 years in existence, folks. There have been dozens of legislative bills introduced every year to tweak the system. And what are the results? Pain, and people who can't pass on their farm or ranch to the next generation. We've had thousands of changes in the legislative bills in the last 56 years because you can have multiple changes in one legislative bill. I'm going to pass this around so that people can take a look at this. If you want to take a photo of it for your records as it goes by, feel free to do that. What's the result of this? We're the 38th heaviest tax state. Property taxes on our homes are a huge burden. Retirees are leaving our state. Ag property taxes eat up the former profit that raised a family. Farmers and ranchers are selling out and leaving the state. That is our current tax system. Welcome to Epic Option, 87 pages. Look at the difference and you tell me, where's the bigger challenge? Where can some things that shouldn't be happening be happening? You make that decision. Our current tax system is broken beyond repair. It gives power to those in charge. It allows those in charge to pick winners and losers. The programs are required to be competitive with other states are TIF, Tax Increment Financing, Nebraska Dream Act, and Imagine Act. Not everybody who applies for those three gets it. So there's winners and losers. The great thing about Epic Option is it allows all companies to be treated equally. The two legislative bills and 87-page LB 79 were all introduced last year. I'm going to pass this around so people can take a look at it as well. And there were 25 proponent testifiers who were there in favor. And when you look at this, you're going to see farmers and ranchers and business people and grandmas and grandpas and parents who came down. Not a single one of them was paid to be there. And then, in addition to people who couldn't come, there were 229 letters that were received. 199 of them were in support of Epic Option. That was an 87% rating. Now, there was opposition there, and there were 15 of them, and you'll see the list. And when you read the list, you'll see the descriptions. Lobbyists, 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 lobbyists across most of these, presidents, executive directors. And in his closing comments, Senator Erdman said, "Isn't it interesting that everyone who testified in support of Epic Option is a Nebraska property owner paying the burdensome taxes, and they took a day off work and drove hundreds of miles to testify today." And it is interesting that the people who are here in opposition, almost every one of them was paid to be here. Okay, so you can take a photo of that as well. You have two handouts, and as we have questions, I'll just be going through and showing slides that will provide those answers. These are your documents to be able to take home, so I would just encourage you to go ahead and write your name on the top of it, so just in case you leave them behind, we know who to drop them in the mail to. So just so you know, I'm going to tell you the numbers of the slides that I think that you're going to want to hear answers for. So, slide 8, always increasing property taxes. Slide 9 is a picture of how Nebraska looks today. Slide 18 and 20 are important because they're going to show that there's no consumption tax on business-to-business transactions. Slide 16 is really important because it shows this is the positive impact for a husband and wife with no business interest at all, just W-2 wages, the positive impact it'll have on them and their family. Slide 22 is important, as is 26, because we want to talk about, this is, Epic Option is going to be very friendly to everybody when it comes to healthcare. Slide 30 is important. We want to talk about border bleed because our opponents think everybody's going to leave Nebraska and go to other states to buy things. That's not our indication at all when we work the numbers. Slides 32 and 33 are important because 32 shows that we're going to continue to have lots of residential contractors that are going to make money building homes, and you'll see the answer why. 33 is a leapfrog from the 38th heaviest tax state to the #1 least tax state. And then, of course, we want to get into how's all the financing going to take place. So you see that all the government budgets will be placed in full with the year 2026 figures. So that includes county, city, townships, all your local units of government, all the state agencies, and your public school system. So, the last thing I just want to say here, my opening comments, is that one of the things that you're going to see happen is the FUD factor. And our speaker will be up next, and he will continue to go down that path. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll have Mark answering first. And this is a question that came from the audience just tonight. And the question is, for those who are opposed to the EPIC option, what is the solution to our unfair tax system? Not babble, but solutions.
My response will begin with the single sheet that has the long green bar on the bottom. Okay? If you look at the rose-colored in the lower left-hand corner, these are the year 2026 projected figures. These were calculated by the Beacon Hill Institute out of Boston, Massachusetts. They took as much information as they could get from the Nebraska Department of Revenue, and they used their stamp model, which is a dynamic model. They project that there would be $60 billion worth of retail sales in the state that would collect sales tax dollars on at 5.5%. $60 billion. Then they said there's $75 billion worth of retail sales that are currently exempt. Okay? And so, with the vote of the people on November 5th of this year, those exemptions will all go away. Who is in this yellow exemptions? It's government agencies, it's nonprofit organizations, and it's lots of service organizations, haircuts, beauticians, tattoo artists, CPAs, and attorneys will now start to collect consumption tax, which is currently part of this yellow. So you go, husband and wife, you go down to have a will created for your family, it's a retail transaction, you will pay consumption tax on it. But you go to the same attorney because you have some deed work on a land that you're buying or a business or something like that. No consumption tax on that transaction because that's a business-to-business transaction. Same thing for a CPA. You go to them and they do all their tax work for your individual 10 to 40 income tax return. You'll pay a 7.5% consumption tax on that invoice, but you go to the same CPA to have them do your tax work on your farm or your ranch or your business. No consumption tax, because that's a business-to-business transaction. Okay? So, in addition, you'll see the $27 billion over in the right-hand side. This is new transactions, retail transactions that will happen because people have more money, consumable money to spend. As you will see as we get into some slides, the average family will save $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, $7,000. It all just depends upon how much property and income tax you're currently paying. So, when you save that kind of money, you'll invest some of it for retirement, you'll invest some of it for return on investment, but you'll spend a lot of it. And some of that's going to be retail. And so there will be those, that's the projection, 27 billion. So the new tax base, instead of being the ivory colored 60 billion, you will have $162 billion worth of retail sales transactions with which we will collect the 7.5% consumption tax. I want to note that the system is going to be really fair for low-income people. Why? Because there will no longer be any sales tax on used products, whether it's used cars, vehicles, clothing, anything that's used currently. So the consumption tax is only going to be on new retail products and services. So you see up here the huge advantage that you're going to have with no consumption tax on used. It's going to help low-income people because they tend to spend more of their money to buy used than they do new. So that's going to be a really, really positive factor. How much time do I have left? Okay. I have 30 seconds left. The next slide I'll talk about is this one right here. I'll defer to Mr. Sloan.
I'll go ahead and read the question again, if that's okay with you, Brian.
That's fine.
For those who are opposed to the EPIC option, what is the solution to our unfair tax system? Not babble, but solutions.
Yeah, let me be clear on the unfair tax system. I think we're just talking property tax. We had income tax reform last year. Governor Pillett's income tax reform bill. We're competitive income tax at this point. Sales tax records the upper end currently. And we're really talking property tax. The question is, what's the real solution? As was stated, this is not a great solution. So included in what would be taxed would be not-for-profits. So if Catholic Services provides food or housing or medical services, or Lutheran Family Services provides food, clothing, or services, or any other not-for-profits, if Goodwill provides any services, if the Boys Clubs, Girls Clubs, if Boy Scouts provide any services, they're taxed. Your church, any services that your church provides would be taxed. We generally do not tax churches in this country. This would break the chain. In what is really possible, there is no simple solution to this, as you might imagine. It's the reason we have those bills. But the concept is pretty simple. It's no different than in your house. The only way to cut taxes, ever, and I've been doing this for 40 years, is to grow government spending slower than you grow your economy. And that's a two-sided coin. You have to control government spending, and you've got to grow the state. What you didn't hear on the list of people who testified, and I'm sorry, I was one of the lobbyists that testified last year in opposition. What you didn't see were young people coming and saying, God, I want this epic tax. I can't wait to pay 8% on everything I bought. All my internet, all my Facebook, on Amazon, Google. Number one issue for this city and this state and for the 20,000 businesses that are chamber members across the state is workforce. There's no more important need for our state than young families, young children, and young workers to continue to build our community and to keep our communities going. And that's true for my hometown of Gearing to Omaha. This is a revenue neutral bill, meaning that there is no cut in taxes overall, we're just shifting. So all those people who own lots of land or expensive homes and get tax savings, somebody has to lose. Now, the economic report will say, nobody loses. Okay? But hear me out. For every large landowner who saves money, somebody does this. In my own case, my wife and I would save lots of money with this bill. My son, not so much. Single, lives in an apartment, just getting started, and will pay tax on everything that moves. My savings will be paid for by his generation. It's the opposite of what we need to do to solve our community's problems. So what we need to do is do the hard thing. We need to get together with our school leaders, our city leaders. We need to fix the budget processes. There are issues in terms of the budget processes in city government and schools that are not of their own making. They've been made by the legislature for many years. And we've got to sit down and we've got to put a cap on valuation increases and levies, and agree to how fast we're going to grow government. And it cannot be faster than we grow the state, but we cannot grow the state without young people. I always say, as sad as it is for me, I am not the future of the state's economy. Unfortunately, I'm the future of some assisted living in places God's lost someday. My son is the future, and my daughter is the future of the state, and my grandson is the future of the state. And we have to leave the state that we don't tax debt. And you have to wonder, if this is such a good idea, it's been around for 30 years, 40 years. 40 years ago, I worked with the Reagan administration, with the same economists that came up with this idea. They came up with it 40 years ago. Not a single state has enacted this in 40 years. Now, we may just be smarter than people in Ohio. I know we're smarter than people in Iowa, but I wonder.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, so we're Brian next. Brian, you get to field this question first. And the question is, a tax commissioner will be a mix of umpire, judge, regulator, and sheriff. That's a lot of power. Is it too much?
Yes, and yes, and yes, and yes. Full disclosure, at 29 years old, I became assistant to the Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service in Michigan, and served at the last 2 years of Reagan administration in the IRS, trying to, in those days, cure a bunch of issues the IRS had. It is the most powerful agency in the country, and when it goes off the rails, it is a bad thing for everybody concerned. The same is true with state commissioners. This makes the state commissioner more powerful, not less powerful. Right now, our Constitution that's being amended in these two bills reflects in its entirety a distrust of Lincoln. In the 1860s, we had some pretty corrupt governors, territorial governors. And so our Constitution is built so half of the budget is Lincoln, and half the unicameral never sees. It's local school boards, it's local NRDs, it's local fire departments, it's local cities and local counties who all assess their own taxes and budget hearings that are held right here. This puts the tax commissioner in charge of every single dollar that goes through Nebraska, not half. Every single dollar, and it puts those 49 senators in the legislature in charge of how much gets doled out in every community in the state. This is the antithesis of trying to avoid centralization of power. This is the ultimate centralization of power. And while the school board here could create a budget, it will have to be approved by the legislature. And those 49 senators, one who may or may not be from Holdridge, will decide to pay to both the city and the county.
Thank you, Brian. Mark, same question. A tax commissioner will be a mix of umpire, judge, regulator, and sheriff. That's a lot of power. Is it too much?
We have worked hard to maximize local control. Local control starts right here with your wallet, or your billfold, or your savings account, and your checking account. Okay? And according to our calculations of the Beacon Health Institute, again, the average working family is going to save $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, or more, depending upon how big their tax bill is currently. In addition, you'll continue to vote for your county commissioners just the way that you always have. You'll continue to vote for public school board members just as you always have continued to do that. Our idea, you will need to be more involved with your government than you ever have been in the past. You can talk to a lot of school board members and they'll say, we're lucky to get 1 or 2 people that come to a school board meeting even if we're talking about the budget. Okay, that can't continue. We need to roll up our shirt sleeves, invest our time period, shut off the TV and go down and be a part of those processes, whether it's at the county level or whether it's at the public school level. Okay, we set this up so that every county is going to have equal clout regardless of what the population is. So it works like the electoral college. You need to know there's going to be downsizing in government. So once this passes, this November, we have all of the 2025 in order to enact it and to prepare for it and get all the software in place. And the little offices and CP offices would have to be able to collect consumption tax and send it in, just like the other retail establishments. And so you have 93 county tax assessors and any people, staff, and there's staff who will no longer have a job. And then in Lincoln at the Department of Revenue, will no longer have the income tax division. And so the senators tell us it should only take about half the number of people to run the consumption tax as what it did the income tax division. There will be 5 new people involved in your process. Local control, you have 3 county commissioners or board of supervisors typically in every county. They will elect the one who will then be on board with the other individual commissioners from the other counties, and they will hire a regional representative who will then collate all the budgets for all the cities, the townships, villages, and roads, local units of government, sheriff department, whole 9 yards. You'll have 3 buckets of money that will come back to you from Lincoln. The very first one for your county is your county trust fund. The funds for the 93 counties is based, each county will be based on a 5-year moving average plus the increase in the consumer price index. So this will fund all your local units of government, just as you have today. And the state treasurer pays to your county's bank account, and the treasurer then distributes to all the local units of government. Your second bucket of money coming in there's additional ways for you to be able to get it. The most important ones for the greater Nebraska, which are the 90 counties, not counting Douglas, Sarpy, and Lancaster County. The road score is going to be really important for you because you have a lot of roads up here in miles and you have a smaller population. Okay? And so the cost per mile is higher here because you don't have as many people. That will even it out more. And then the county hospital score, when you get into the Sand Hills, there may only be 1 or 2 towns in the whole county. There may only be 1 medical facility in the whole county. That's currently paid for by property tax dollars. We have to replace those with consumption tax dollars. Then when it's time for you to build a new courthouse, you'll have a vote of the people. And once that's done, then you will submit your funds and it'll come to you. All these budgets will go to the governor, they'll go to the appropriations committee, you'll go through 3 rounds of floor debate. If you have filled out your template and you stayed within the guidelines showed there, then your funding will come to you.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, Mark. The next question came from the audience, and it is, I keep hearing talk about property taxes being too high. They are. What about inheritance taxes taking farms away from families?
The inheritance tax is a challenge. I'll go back to the 3 stories that I started with here. My farmer friends in Sydney that are worth $1.6 million are going to go to their heavenly reward. It's just a matter of time. So when their children inherit that money, okay, what are they going to do with it? Are they going to continue to hold on to the farm as it is when they only get 1 banana split return on investment? Or are they going to sell the land? Okay? So inheritance taxes are a problem, but no doubt, bigger ranches, bigger farms, and in the city and the bigger businesses. Absolutely, that's one of the reasons why we have inheritance tax as one of the 5 taxes that we want to eliminate. We believe that because we will be reducing not reducing, eliminating the property taxes, it's going to be a lot easier for new farmers to be able to get started because people who are absentee owners are more likely to hold on to the land because they're going to get some return on investment on it. And so they're not going to be pushed to sell it right away. If we want to have more Bill Gates and people rich people coming in and buying our land, then let's just keep going down the road we're going down because that's what they're doing. Okay? There's no incentive for families to be able to hold on to it. There's no economic way for families to be able to hold on to that family farm or ranch today. So we eliminate the inheritance tax and we eliminate the property tax so we make it economically feasible to continue to own that property. Really makes a huge difference. How much time do I have? Okay. I want to touch on one of the things that Brian said earlier, and that is, if consumption tax is such a good idea, why haven't other states done it? Because it's a challenge to get it done, number one. And number two, why? One of the things that we're finding is that other states are watching what we're doing, and they are really interested to the point that they're taking action. In Kansas, where the property tax is only 35% of what we pay here, they have taken those 87 pages. They've taken the 2 constitutional amendments that Brian read up front, and they have put that into their language in Kansas, and they're working to bring that to reality. Wyoming, they took the same thing and are running with it, and their taxes are only 25% of what our taxes are. So Senator Urban asked me, why are you doing it? You're way ahead of us. You're only paying 25% of what we're paying in property taxes. And this was the answer. It will preserve liberty and freedom for our citizens. What we're doing is proposing is going back to where property ownership was a sacred thing in our country. Originally, it was life, liberty, and property. It wasn't life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. As long as there's property taxes, all of us have a lifelong lien to the government. And in previous town hall meetings, when I made that statement, generally it's a couple my age, they kind of raise their hand, well, Mark, you're being pretty harsh there. We paid off our house 20 years ago. We own our house. Congratulations, sir. I'm happy for you. I just challenge you. Go home. Don't pay your property taxes for 3 years. Okay? When they come knocking on your door shortly after that and say, pay up or get out, they mean it. And if you don't pay up, when you're evicted, you can call me and tell me I was right. They had a lifelong lien against your property. So I don't care if it's your home, your ranch, or your farm. As long as there's property taxes, we have a lifelong lien. So we got to come back and prosper. Okay? If we keep going down this road, a lot of towns smaller than Hastings and Kearney and the pipeline on I-80, it's going to be ghost town Nebraska. Because people are going to sell out. It's just going to be big corporations that come in and buy it. That will be a sad, sad day.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, Brian, same question. I keep hearing talk about property taxes being too high. They are. What about inheritance taxes taking farms away from families?
Yeah, we're going to agree on this one. The inheritance tax is one of the dumbest taxes we have in the state. And we would separately impose or would like to remove inheritance taxes. And it's just on farms. It's business succession. We've got a real business succession issues in Nebraska because we're not attracting enough young people. There aren't enough young people to take over our businesses. There aren't not enough young people to take over our farms. And so it comes back to that is not only do we have eliminated inheritance taxes, but we just don't have enough young people to take over our businesses and keep our communities thriving. And so, but the one caveat of inheritance taxes, unfortunately, is because we've never really fixed how we budget in communities and local government. There's parts of local government that are very dependent on those inheritance tax revenues. And so when we do it, we need to reform that whole structure about how we fund and how we manage budgets locally, and not just cut inheritance taxes and find out we've got local budget problems. again, in this state, whenever you do one thing, it ripples across the state in other ways. I agree there's an urgency to this. This has to get done. But it needs to be done thoughtfully in a way that we secure our communities, we attract young people, and we fix our budget in the process, and we have to drive and actually cutting inheritance taxes would help succession planning, and it would help drive growth. So we're on the same page.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Okay, we've got you next, Brian. Senator Erdman said he recently talked to a Nebraskan and had a concern. He then said he made a change on that issue. Can you tell me what it was? If a change was made, how can we be sure a bunch of carve-outs, there aren't a bunch of carve-outs that will pick a winner and loser in tax exemptions?
With that big, or we're assuming, how will we know that this won't just simply turn into, a continuing set of exemptions? They have drafted this in a way that this is a constitutional amendment, and so the legislature cannot overturn it other than changing the Constitution. And this constitutional amendment says there can only be one exemption, which is groceries off premises. So it's very unlikely you're going to see a string of amendments. My concern is not that end, but my concern is it only provides that exemption. Currently, our sales taxes in the code provide you don't tax B2B transactions. You don't tax business transactions. You don't tax churches. You don't tax all of these things. The way the constitutional amendment that you're signing when you sign the petition is all retail consumption. It doesn't say individual. Doesn't say who, it says all new goods and services. And my fear is that precludes the legislature from ever creating a business exemption or an ag exemption that combines really would be. And that trucks purchased and equipment purchased by a construction company would be taxed. And that these B2B transactions wouldn't exist because the legislature can't, because the literal language of the Constitution says all retail consumption. It doesn't stay approved to taxpayers.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Mark, same question. Senator Erdman said recently he talked to a Nebraskan and had a concern. He then said he made a change on that issue. Can you talk about what that was? And if a change was made, how can we be sure a bunch of carve-outs wouldn't happen, that they would pick winners and losers in tax exemptions?
Well, I'm not sure which specific change this question is focused on, but I can tell you that one of the major changes that happened in our discussions from a year ago we had a prebate built into this to where every family was going to get money up front to pay for the consumption tax, and groceries were not going to be exempted. And so that was just too hard to try to implement and be able to explain to people, and so we made the decision that, with the writing of LB 79, that okay, we're going to exempt the groceries, okay, to make it understandable so that low-income people are not going to be burdened, or any family is going to be burdened because they're buying, having to pay consumption tax on the food that they're eating. We believe that what the legislature will do, with Brian's point of the uncertainty, we believe that common heads will, good common sense will rule in the legislature, and people will understand that retail consumption taxes are paid by consumers, and businesses are not consumers. And so businesses will not have to pay consumption tax when they purchase things from one another. So I've got 4 specific examples. Since we're in agricultural Nebraska, We'll just start right here for farmers who are buying new tractors, tillage equipment, combines, trucks, land, fertilizer, chemicals, center pivot irrigation systems, or crop dusting. Okay, no consumption tax on any of those transactions because they're business to business. For ranchers who would be buying new tractors, balers, loaders, more for ranch land, feed, salt, minerals, vet supplies, no consumption tax because it's a business to business transaction. That'll be a part of these 87 pages right here, the details that will need to be worked on once the people vote this in place this November. The really key thing about especially farmers and ranchers is there's 4 different ways that people have their farm or ranch set up as a business. Sole proprietorship, LLC, partnership, corporation. Doesn't make any difference how your farm or ranch or business in town is set up. That qualifies as a business according to the IRS tax code. When we moved into the city, okay, we have a lot of medical facilities being built around the state. The older you grow, the more you have to go there. I know I certainly have had to. Okay, no consumption tax to build the building, or to be able to put the front counter in the receptionist area, or to have all of the computers in place and the software to capture all the information they need, or to buy the expensive medical equipment like emergency room, x-ray, MRI, CAT scan, surgical room equipment. And then since construction is always such a big ticket item, you know, there's a lot of new hotels in the state of Nebraska, Beatrice, Norfolk, and up and down the I-80 pipeline. We're getting 4- and 5-story hotels all along there. Okay, no consumption tax to build or to furnish those buildings. And then we have a picture of the Google facility out in La Vista. No consumption tax to pay for the earth moving, leveling, concrete foundations, paving, exterior or interior finishes. Okay? So we believe that good common sense will definitely make sure that there's no consumption tax on business to business transactions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, Mark, this question is specifically written for you. Can you explain why the individual counties and towns can't keep gathering taxes as they do now? Why did they develop the 5 regions? That was that one that you showed us.
Restate the question again, I missed it.
Can you explain why the individual counties and towns can't keep gathering taxes as they do now? Why the 5 regions?
Well, the reason that we have the 5 regions is because we need to be able to collate the information that's going to be going into the Appropriations Committee and the governor, because that's where the budgets start from. There we go. This is a way for Greater Nebraska to finally have equal representation, not based on population. Okay? Currently, the system operates the way the House of Representatives does, which is the states of California and New York that have the most residents have the largest number of congressmen, right? In Nebraska, since we have a small population, we only have 3 U.S. congressmen. And other states have 20 or more, okay? We wanted to be fair to the people of Greater Nebraska, and we define Greater Nebraska as the 90 counties, 90 counties, other than Douglas, Sarpy, and Lancaster County. Okay? They have really had a windfall. They've grown in size. Why? Not because of people moving from other states to Nebraska, because of people like Mark Hawkins, who moved there because the farm wasn't big enough for 2 families and my dad wasn't ready to retire yet. Okay? You talk to people in Omaha and Lincoln, where were you born and raised? All over, Scotts Bluff, Geary, O'Neill, Magna, Nebraska, Sydney, Sonoma, Lodgepole, okay, Funk. So they've had a windfall. And so greater Nebraska has really taken it, you know, we got this, had the short straw out here for years and years. And our property taxes have gone up unbelievably out here. So we created these regions because every county gets one vote. Okay? And so now it's going to prevent Omaha, Lincoln, and Sarpy County from running away with things because they get one vote, just like you get out here in Adams County, Cheyenne County, etc. So that's why we created it that way.
Thank you, Mark. Would you like to rebuttal on that, Brian?
Yeah, if I could. I agree that I think what they're trying to do is create some middle ground between just sending your money completely to unicameral, having them decide. So this is an intermediate step, and then it goes to unicameral. Along those ways, you know, two quick comments. One, I want to read again. He listed all the items clearly would be B2B and wouldn't be taxed. And that's true in terms of what they've written in legislation. But I want to read the constitutional amendment again on your side. The amendment language says, beginning January 1, 2026, the state of Nebraska shall impose a retail consumption tax or an excise tax on all new goods and services. All new goods and services. And the legislature may authorize political subdivisions to do the same, and there shall be no exemption from such taxes except for grocery items purchased from off premises. This is in the Constitution. The court's pretty sticky about the ability of the legislature to draft legislation consistent with the Constitution. This is the problem about writing tax law in the Constitution. If it were just being done in the legislature, it was just the bill that Senator Urban, then it would clearly have to be. But the language on the ballot initiative, I have severe concerns about that. It would do so. My only other comment is, I've been really having trouble tonight. There was a day when I could dunk on that rim. I think they made them higher than those days. It seems a lot higher.
Okay, Brian, the next question is for you. How would you suggest lowering taxes for the Nebraska citizens and reduce the tax burden?
So we've been on a path, and I don't know if people have noticed. So during Governor Heinemann's term, we were averaging about 6% growth in spending in the state, both in terms of local spending and state spending, which was pretty good compared to some prior averages. And there were some tax cuts. Governor Ricketts came in, he held state spending to 3% or under every year. And our economic growth was pretty significant. And that plus some of the COVID money last year created that $2 billion that we spent on tax reform last year. Okay. When your growth in revenues exceeds your growth in what you spend. Now the local governments and schools tended to average around 5 to 6% during that same period. But the state has reduced it. Governor Pillen is targeting 2% or under for state spending, and maybe even under that. We're controlling spending growth better than almost any other state, clearly at the state level. We need to fix, as I said before, we really need to understand what we're doing to define the problem and understand city, county, school budgets and get the growth under control in a way that we still have good schools, good cities, good counties, and do the hard work it takes to make that happen and keep local control within the locality so that local communities are paying for their own services, with the exception of schools where the state does have an obligation to provide equal funding across the state. If you know anything about the TOS formula, you know that has to be reformed as well. It is tough work, but I think that there is clearly enough issues around property tax, and you clearly have a governor who wants to fix the problem. chambers clearly want to fix the problem. Communities want to fix the problem. I think the school superintendents want to fix the problem. The county and city administrators want to fix the problem. I think the time has never been riper for doing what we always do, is come together as a state and fix the problem. Okay? There is no tax bill. There is no tax bill that fixes the problem without dealing with spending. Period.
Thank you, Brian. Would you like to comment on that, Mark?
I'd be happy to. I agree with Brian that controlling spending is really important. Really, really important. And so then my next question is, well, how good of a job have we been doing for the last 30 or 40 years, controlling our spending? And I see a woman back there shaking her head back and forth going, not very good. Okay? So, I want to give the governor and the legislature a lot of credit because they worked hard last year. They got the community colleges, property tax assessment, privileges taken away from them. They're now part of the overall budget of the state. And we got a 6% property tax decrease. All right, feeling good. Oh, wait a minute. My property tax statement just came in the mail. Real challenge here. 23% increase in Western Douglas County. That's a 3-year-old home worth $1.1 million, and they got a $294,000 valuation increase, and the mill levy stayed the same. Okay? It's called a kick in the teeth. Then you go to Shatter, Nebraska, one of the oldest homes in the entire state. It's 125 years old, teeny little house. Exact opposite of the one in Douglas County. 1-bedroom home, no garage, partial basement, had an increase of 78%. Hickman, just south of Lincoln, 2,400 square foot home, 29 years old, 38% increase. Let's see, I got a 6% decrease here, and I got a 38% increase there. I'm still behind the 8 ball. Okay? And that was after a lot of hard work, folks. The current system is broken, and it's broken beyond repair. We have hundreds of stories that we could share with you. This is the worst one that we've seen so far. 148% increase on a bowling alley in Plainview, Nebraska, just west of Norfolk. Okay? You talk to this man, Mark. I didn't add a single new brick on the outside. I didn't put a new roof on. We didn't put in new concrete paving in the parking lot. I didn't put a bunch of new equipment inside. I got a 148% increase. Now, I don't know about you folks, but if I'd have got a bill that big of an increase, I'd have probably had a heart attack and wouldn't be here to talk about it. Okay? So, love to talk about cutting spending. Okay? That's what we put in ours, a 6% increase, or excuse me, the consumer price index plus a 5-year moving average for the counties, and a 2% increase on a 5-year moving average for the schools. Okay? And you talk to some superintendents and they say, Mark, we can't continue to operate the way we're operating now. And I say, I understand. Okay? I don't know about you, but we've had to tighten our belt a lot in our family, just in the last year. Neither my wife or I have had an automobile accident in 38, 40 years. Our insurance went up 28% on 2 vehicles. Did you folks have that problem? Did your home insurance go up? Well, we got to just keep tightening our belt because we got to pay our property taxes because we had a $500 a year increase on our home. Okay, now we have the privilege of paying $5,000 for the home we've lived in for 38 years. Okay, we will never own our home. Okay, we have a lifelong lien against us, and until we eliminate property taxes, we're all in the same boat. We eliminate property taxes, you will see prosperity come back to this state. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, Mark, we have a couple of people asking questions that I'm going to try to consolidate. And this is in regards to, under EPIC, will there be a consumption tax on the following? So they're asking about housing, rent for housing, daycare, assisted living, and private schools.
Yes, there would be a consumption tax on assisted living because that's a retail transaction, okay? And so for the people who are in there that still own a farm or a ranch and are paying all their money away in taxes, they would have money to really help them out. Private schools, according to our 87 pages, we would see that as an investment, so I don't believe that there would be a consumption tax on that, just like there would be on college tuition, because we see that as an investment as well. And then what were the other two?
Daycare and rent for housing.
Okay, daycare, yes, there will be a consumption tax on that. And then rent. Okay. Yes, you will pay consumption tax on the rent, 7.5%. Okay, but your landlord will no longer have property taxes and income taxes that they are currently putting in your monthly lease payment that you are paying. Okay, I recognize that there's going to be some greedy landlords out there that are going to, once the people vote this in place and property taxes go away, they're going to want to keep that because that's a whole bunch of extra profit money coming in. Currently, in the area of Millard and Omaha where I live, a 2-bedroom apartment is $2,500 a month. Okay? You can figure that 10% of that to sometimes 15% is property taxes. So that's $250 to $300 a month of that $2,500 is property taxes that tenant is paying. Now, there's people in apartments that will tell you, hey, I don't pay any property taxes. Sir or ma'am, I'm sorry, but the reality is it's a pass-through fee and you're paying the landlord's property taxes for him or her, okay? So what will happen? We truly believe that capitalism works, okay? And for those of you who've been to Omaha or Lincoln, you've seen there's all kinds of these apartment complexes. We're going to call this guy the greedy guy. I'm not going to give up $250 a month. And so what's going to happen? The people who are living in that apartment complex live, and just down the road, not very far, is a similar looking apartment complex with similar amenities, and they drop their price by $250 a month. Where do you think these people are going to go? They're going to stay there, pay $250 or $300 more, and they move it. They're moving. It'll only take the first landlord on the eastern part of the state to start the process. Now, I recognize in smaller towns, you don't have apartment complexes like that. You have single family dwelling homes. And so it'll take a while for that to get to you. And what may happen is you will have some new apartments that will be built in your town because some really good, sharp business people are going, you know what, there's a shortage of apartments and these greedy landlords are holding on to all that money. So yes, you'll pay a 7.5% more, but you're going to get a 15 to 20% decrease because of no property income taxes.
Thank you. Ryan, would you like to speak on that one? Under EPIC, will there be consumption tax on rent for housing, daycare, assisted living, private schools?
Agreed with that. I think there will probably be a tax on private schools as well. It's the retail sale. It's the private, non-obligated payment. We're taxing nonprofits. We're taxing churches, so I can't imagine that they're not going to tax private schools. The question of home prices and rent. A lot of the economic theory behind this was developed back in the 80s when I was working on federal tax bills with people that were working on it at the same time. And in the 80s, what we had was abundant labor supply and abundant housing. And so actually the economic theories work that are behind this, in that if you could simply put more cash in people's pockets, the economy would grow. And we saw that with Reagan's bill. We saw it with Trump's bill. A few years ago, but with deficit spending, with massive deficits that came with it. We don't have that ability in the state to do that. The assumption in the Beacon Hill report is an increase in new home sales once we add 7.8% to the cost of homes. They predict that between 2026 and 2030, over 4 years, actually, people are going to be so excited about paying 7-point-something% more on to buy a house that there's going to be a 19.6% growth in housing sales, new housing sales in Nebraska. One, that's impossible. We've already seen what interest rates have done to new housing sales, just a few points currently. And two, the old assumptions don't work anymore because of 2 reasons. One is there is an extreme lack of housing in Nebraska. If 50,000 people showed up to come to work today, we could employ them. We just can't house them. And we don't have daycare for their kids. And so we have a big housing problem. In every community I go to is either number 2 or number 3 on the community's list. How do we create affordable housing? This jacks it up in terms of any new construction sales. 2, workforce. The reason we have a housing shortage, part of it is regulatory, but a lot of it is we don't have workforce. We don't have anybody to build houses. And so if you ask me, are we ever going to solve this property tax problem? We can solve this valuation problem. We can solve the budget issues. But unless we solve this workforce issue and attract young families to our communities, we still won't be building houses, and we won't have anybody to staff the daycare, and we won't have anybody to run the hospital. We won't have anybody to run the businesses downtown. And when you think about young kids, I'm having a debate with some people in Lincoln about this right now. The argument is they'll never notice these additional sales taxes. They just won't know they're being taxed $600 or $800. I think they'll notice.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Okay, Brian, so we have another question for you. As stated, growth of the economy is key in tax reduction. Nebraska is already lacking programs to bring new business. TIF is one of the only local programs available. Without that, how do you propose attracting business to the state?
And so the number one reason people move to a state turns out to be what they view as better jobs. And so the key for Nebraska in terms of continuing to grow, well, first of all, Nebraska was the 2nd or 3rd fastest growing state during COVID. The ag economy has been really good. Not in every instance, but really good. The reason ag land values are so high is corn and soybeans have done pretty well. Even cow-calf guys this year are doing better. The manufacturing in Nebraska, which is our 2nd largest industry, grew at double digits for the last 4 or 5 years. We have one of the strongest economies in the country. The only thing holding us back is we don't have young people, workforce. The core for economic growth, if you ask kids today. So I did a press conference with the governor last year, and unfortunately we had a bunch of FHA kids. It was great press conference. Unfortunately, one member of the media put a mic up to one of the kids and said, what would make you leave the state? What would make you come back? Well, to come back, we all grab. Okay? What would make you leave? And this young woman at the bank said, lack of opportunity. You got to get behind that. Lack of opportunity for these kids is lack of a community and state that attracts technology companies and technology jobs in agriculture, manufacturing, and all our regular businesses. This would include a tax on all services, meaning all internet services, all digital services, all technology services. This is not a pro-technology piece of tax legislation. We have to make sure that the agriculture technology companies that develop over the next 20 years develop in Nebraska and not Iowa, not Minnesota. They're definitely not. So one of the things we have to do with our tax code is make sure that in ag and manufacturing, construction, all these things that we do really well, that we are bringing these digital companies, not only to Lincoln and Omaha, but the whole range of Erie and to North Platte and to Shell. We need a tax code that resembles that. So when you talk about economic development, we don't have to do anything special, but we cannot poke technology and digital services in the eye by taxing them higher than other states.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, Mark. The question was, as stated, growth of the economy is key in tax reduction. Nebraska is already lacking programs to bring new business. TIF is one of the only available. Without that, how do you propose attracting business to the state?
Our proposal is based on the fact that everyone's going to have more dollars to be able to pay for the consumption tax that Brian just talked about. Okay? So, for those of you who have a smartphone, if you'll take it out real quick, and I want you to put in $4,000. I'm just going to use that for an average savings for family across the state of Nebraska. So $4,000, divide that by decimal point 0.075, and you come out with $53,333. That's how many dollars worth of product you have to buy at retail in order to take back all the $4,000 you just saved in property and income taxes. That pays for an awful lot of internet bills and telephone bills and all other kind of bills. Okay? I want to tell you just a little bit about my background. I was in the construction services and traveled across the United States. There were firms located here in Nebraska, headquartered here in Nebraska. And when I was making sales calls, it was on the East Coast or the West Coast, I always like to ask people, who are you and where are you from? And it was amazing how many people from Nebraska I met in all these other states. And so I would ask them, well, how do you like living here in New York City? How do you like living in Joyce? How do you like living here in LA? Oh, Mark, the traffic is terrible. It's 7 days a week. You never get away from it. If I had a chance to move back to Nebraska and move my family back because there was reason to do so, I would. And I'd move as close back to my hometown as I could. Okay? I can tell you that there's a lot of businesses owned by Nebraskans outside of this state that when we pass this, they're going to come back. I'm from Sydney. If you look at slide 35, it's a picture of the Cabela's headquarters. It sits there empty. It's been how many years now, Brian, since they were bought out by Bass Pro? Okay, 6, 7, 8 years at least, right? And I can assure you that the Department of Economic Development and the Sydney Chamber of Commerce have been working hard, really hard, for those 6, 7 years to fill that building. And you know what? They have one little bitty corner of business sitting out there that covers 1%. There used to be 1,300 jobs in this building. Now, once the people of Nebraska pass this bill, we have a whole year for the word to get out and for businesses to take a look. And I can tell you that there will, no doubt in my mind, there's businesses in Colorado and Wyoming and South Dakota and Kansas that are going to sit there and go, did you see what they just did in Nebraska? Did you see that they don't have to pay property taxes or state income tax or inheritance tax anymore? And there's no corporate property taxes to pay? Why are we living here in the front range of Colorado or Wyoming or in South Dakota? Let's move our business across the line. We have 2 national economists that are 100% behind this. They've been in Senator Urban's office a couple of different times. The first one is Stephen Moore, M-O-O-R-E. If you watch conservative television on any night of the week, they have an economic issue. That's the man who they interview. He said, whoever's governor when this passes will be the most popular governor ever in the history of this state because of the economic boom. Art Laffer is the economist who worked with then Governor Reagan in California in 1983, supply side economy. Convinced Governor Reagan, if you'll reduce the tax rate from 2.5% of value down to 1%, you'll have an economic boom in the state of California that you can't believe. And they did. It lasted 10 years. They both tell us this is the most bold and innovative plan we have ever seen. You're working to eliminate 5 taxes and replace it with 1. You will have an economic boom like you cannot believe. And since I've got a construction background, I can tell you it's real easy for construction workers from all different parts of the country to move where there's going to be a demand, and you'll have all kinds of homes that will come in here and get built. And I'll talk about this slide the next time with the cost of the consumption tax on a new home.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, I'm going to combine, we probably got enough time for about 2 more questions from the audience. So I'm going to combine, I have 3 that are fairly similar. What guarantee is there that the EPIC tax rate won't rise from the 7.5? Is there a cap? And what if it's not enough to cover expenses? It's kind of a...
Okay, so what's the guarantee that the 7.5% that we have calculated in ours will be reality? Well, I can tell you that the 2 national economists we just talked about, after they read the Beacon Hill Institute, made some phone calls, said that they believe that that is really a well-done calculation, and they believe that there will be such a large economic boom in the state of Nebraska that in 4 years, there's a really good chance the legislature will reduce it from 7.5 down to below 7%. Art Laffer thinks it could go to 6.85. Okay? Now, what if it's wrong? First of all, we have all kinds of cash that moves in as we get this thing started, because all the property taxes are accrued in 1 year and paid the next. So, even though property taxes accrual stops January 1 of 2026, you'll be paying your 2025 taxes in, that will be 6.6 billion plus or minus that's going to come in. In addition, we have $1.6 billion in the rainy day fund in the government, or in the Lincoln right now, that's a part of that cash flow. And then the final is there's $400 million. You go back to the single sheet that has the green bar at the bottom, because the calculation for Beacon Hills, it will only take 7.23% to get to the 11.7 billion. Okay? We have it in the bill at 7.5. That 1/4% difference is $400 million additional buffer that will be coming in. Absolute worst case scenario is, okay, we don't have as big an economic boom as what we thought. Then the legislature is going to have to say, we're going to have to raise it from 7.5 to 7.75 or 8 or 8.5. And Art Laffer did the calculation and said you could have your rate at 15%, and people will still be saving money compared to the burdensome tax base that you have today.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, Brian, do you need me to read that again? What guarantee is there that the rate won't rise from the 7.5%? Is there a cap? And what if it's not enough to cover expenses?
Yeah, so the first one is there is no cap. And as you remember from the introduction, I lived in Berlin for a number of years. They have VAT taxes in Berlin, which are these kinds of taxes. Our VAT tax in Berlin was 16% on everything we bought, and that was typical for all of Europe. The history of these kinds of taxes are they're easier to increase than even other taxes, because a 0.5% point increase raises literally hundreds of millions of dollars. In terms of what you do if you're short, 2 things. Our estimates are that we'll be at least $3 to $5 billion short the first year on day 1, because on January 1 there is no growth. I'm going to argue that on December 31 there's going to be no growth the first This is the first I've heard that we're going to both collect property tax and the epic tax in the first year. So instead of collecting 11 or 12, we're going to collect 18. This is the first I've heard that. The estimate is one of two things is going to happen. If we tax business transactions, and if we tax government services, and if we tax all the nonprofits, they may be able to get the rate under 10%. If all that happens. But if we tax B2B transactions and we tax nonprofits, we'll have bigger fish to fry than that. If there is a business tax exemption, and we don't tax government services, and we don't tax not-for-profits, which I can't imagine any state senators will vote for, then this rate gets to 15, 16, 17, 18% really, really, really fast. And anything above maybe 8 or 9%, 45% of our population lives within an easy drive of the border. If you're in Omaha and everything you buy costs 10 or 12 or 14% less by just driving to Council Bluffs, you're going to make all your big purchases there. Interestingly, the constitutional amendment doesn't provide the right for the legislature to have a use tax. There's no ability to go back and enforce the tax against people who go over to Council Bluffs and then bring it back to Omaha. And legislation would provide for enforcement. But the constitutional amendment says the only tax you can impose is a retail tax. It does not say you can impose a use tax. Again, the expectations that are built into these assumptions that first year are in the first year, very first year, 2% population growth, nearly 4% consumption growth. Net employment increases by 47,000 jobs. We can't fill 60 to 70,000 jobs right now because we don't have the workforce. We don't need 47,000 more jobs, and they're not going to create any more economy until we start driving some workforce to fill it. Our lapper's in his 80s now, and I have a lot of respect for our lapper because I was a part of the Reagan administration part of 86 Act. The economic strategies in the 80s that Bart talks about worked in the 80s. That was not a workforce short environment. It was a workforce rich environment and a capital short economy. We have the opposite today. We have all the capital in the world, we just don't have the workforce. So the same supply side tactics that worked in 86 in a workforce short environment don't work. Creating 47,000 jobs doesn't automatically allow the workforce to fill it, creating revenues. And this is the problem with the assumptions. And so where we end up, if we end up $3 to $5 billion short, that's bigger than our rainy day fund. We've never spent our rainy day fund. This is a leap of faith that we all jump in the boat together. And somehow it works. The two economists and national economists, three from a place called Beacon Hill, which I've never heard of in 40 years. We're gonna put the state's future on the backs of 5 economists. I'm not willing to do it. 3 to 5 billion, and other groups have estimated much more. I try to stay pretty conservative, but we're going to be short 3 to 5 billion unless we collect taxes in half that first year. And if we are really going to collect both property taxes and this tax in the first year, so taxpayers pay 150%, then maybe another thing.
Okay, Brian, you're up first for the last question that I'm going to try to combine. So this is about schools, and the two questions kind of in one. How will public schools receive EPIC funding? And in the EPIC proposal, school boards don't get to say the person that represents the school. Why won't they get a say on a representative that represents their school under EPIC?
Yeah, so in the way that it's been set up, as I understand, is the school board will still create a budget proposal. That budget proposal will be conglomerated with the other local budget proposals and go up to this regional group of 19 counties. And within the 19 counties, then they will equalize among the 19 counties. So that school board's budget can get changed at the regional level. Then that budget will go to unit count. And the appropriations committee can change it again. And then the governor has veto authority. And so at that point, then whatever comes out of that process will come back. One thing we haven't talked about is legislature's only working 60 days this year. And we have a part-time legislature. If all of a sudden the legislature is in charge of every school budget, and every county budget, and every city budget, we will need a full-time legislature. These will no longer be part-time jobs. That might be good, it might be bad. I'm also wondering whether we can continue with one house legislature. In that the amount of work in appropriations to deal with all of these budgets would take a full-time legislature and maybe a 2 months legislature.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Mark, the question, I didn't say it very clearly. How are public schools going to receive EPIC funds? And why don't school boards get a say on the person that will be representing their funding?
Okay, we have a similar map for the funding of the public schools. So the one county commissioner will join other county commissioners to hire the regional representative that will handle the public school budgets for each one of the individual areas. The regional representatives review and consolidate budgets. They don't have any authority to change them unless there's been discussion coming back and forth between one school system and not being in compliance. Being in compliance is this explanation. All 244 public school budgets are paid for with this first bucket of money called the Public Schools Trust Fund. School budgets are based on a 5-year average plus a 2% increase. The state treasurer will pay monthly with direct payment to each school district's bank accounts. Okay? Some superintendents tell me, Mark, we can't function with a 2% increase. And I say, well, you've been asking the property owners to live with a 14 and 20 and 30% increase for many years. We've had to tighten our belts, and so we need a cap of some type. We believe this is a reasonable cap. And so we're confident with all the brain power that there is in the public school system, they'll be able to figure out a way to be able to comply with this cap. You have your second bucket of money that comes back above the original one. Okay, you have 5 different templates that you can fill out in order to get extra money. Okay, and each school district will receive additional revenue based upon their stabilization scores. TIOSA is currently the way that funds are supposed to be distributed back to the public school system. And TIOSA has been manipulated to where the large schools get most of the money, 90% plus of the money. And then occasionally you'll get some money in Greater Nebraska. The smaller the school, the less money that you have, the less opportunity you have at coming back. Special student needs, of course, important. For those of us who have mentally and physically handicapped children, we know it's one teacher for 3 or 4 students, not a regular classroom where we have 17 or 20 or 25 students. The second one is really important in Greater Nebraska. It's a transportation score. Because in Omaha and Lincoln, you go past the big farm bus yard, okay, and 60 buses leave and they drive 4 or 5 miles, they scatter around. They go into a subdivision, they drive 1.25 miles, the bus is full. And they come back to the school. In Greater Nebraska, you haven't even gotten out of town 5 miles and maybe picked up 1 student yet. Okay? So the cost for transportation has never been equalized with TIOSA, and it's finally going to with this. Oh, the other thing for special student needs I should mention, wherever we have a meat processing plant in the state of Nebraska, we have a high percentage of workers there who are immigrants. And so their children need to have English as second language teachers in their schools so that they become productive members of society when they grow up. So when you look at the towns of South Sioux City, Madison, Nebraska, Crete, Lexington, Grand Island, and now North Platte, there will have to be some definite additional funds for English special language teachers. Oh, excuse me. And then you may have need for a lot more laptops in your school, or textbooks, or if you have a poverty score, you're in a really poor area, like in Omaha, we have 34 different languages that are spoken. We have some poverty areas there. There would be some additional funds that would come to your school. Then finally, it's time to build a new school. How are we going to get it done? Okay? After a vote of the people in the district, the school board will apply for funds needed to construct new buildings and facilities. Okay? So, local control. You decide, okay, how many dollars is it going to take to build the school that we need to have in whatever town, whatever public school system that you're in? Okay? And let's just hypothesize that there's 38 schools, I'll say it's 40 schools that submit to get money back to build a new school. But we don't have enough money in the third bucket for all 40. So how are we going to determine who gets what money? I would think common sense is, who's got the oldest school? Let's make sure that they get the money first, and then the second oldest school, and then the third oldest school. And then whoever doesn't get funds this year, they'll be the first ones to get funds next year, because this is an annual process. So that's how the funding will come back to your public school. You're still local control. You're going to elect your school board member just like always. They create the budget, and then it goes through the process and gets funded and linked.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
This is pretty easy for both of you. It's a more logistics type thing. It says, what do you do if you sign a petition but want your name removed?
What do you do if you sign a petition and you need to have your name removed? I don't know the exact answer to that, so I would suggest that you would go to your local county election official and ask them what the procedure would be to have your name removed from the petition. Okay? And I'm sure that they can get that done.
And okay, how many signatures do we need to get on the ballot?
We need 106, our goal is to get 160,000 signatures. We only need 123,000. But we're putting a 20% additional factor on there because not every signature is valid. Unfortunately, some people might sign their name, but they don't use a middle initial. But on the voter registration card, they have a middle initial. That is an invalid signature, and that would not count. Okay? That's how technical they are when they do this. There's a second parameter that we have to meet, and that is we need to have a minimum of 5% valid voter signatures from 38 counties. That's the reason why this last year, from March until December 1, you draw a line through Kearney, Nebraska. There's 55 counties out to Wyoming and the Colorado border. We worked in hard. We went to a lot of county fairs, the state fair, the Husker Harvest Days. I can tell you that we've got one county that's got 14% signatures. We have a handful of counties that are already over 10%, and we have commitments from 32 other counties, not just to get to the 5%, to get to the 10%. Okay? So the bulk of our signatures will now need to come from Lincoln, Omaha, and Sarpy County. So that's why we've hired a paid circulator firm, because we're going to have to go door to door in order to get to the 160,000. The goal will be to have them acquired by May 1st. The Secretary of State has 2 months to be able to validate signatures. So that means we do the green light on July 1st. That gives us July, August, and September to do a massive educational move across the state of Nebraska. Social media advertising, newspaper, radio, television, okay? So that, because the early mail-in ballots come out on September the 28th, and we need to make sure that every voter has had an opportunity to be educated if they're going to use a mail-in ballot.
Okay. So we're wrapping up, and we thank you, Mark and to do a 5-minute summary from each of you to finish off the night. And we're starting with Mark.
First of all, I want to thank everyone for investing your time and energy to come here tonight and to take notes and to listen and learn both what Brian and I had to say. And so if you have additional questions, slide 49 is the one where my name is listed. I'm Mark Bondowitz, the one that's in the middle there. Okay, you can contact me by phone, email, or text, whichever is easier for you, and then I'll respond to you as quickly as I can. If you have additional questions tomorrow, call me, or a week from now, that's fine. One of the things that we've seen with our current system is inflicting a lot of pain. Okay? And I give the legislature a lot of credit, and the Chamber of Commerce, they worked hard last year, but what happened? We got a 6% decrease in our property taxes, and we had a 28% increase in our valuations. All it was a decrease in the increase. That's all that happened. We're all paying more taxes. Virtually everybody's paying more taxes than they were. So we want to make sure that we really compare the current system to Epic. So we thought a final sheet here, available on a table format, would be valuable for people. So our current system is painful, it's broken, it's unsustainable. With Epic Option, it's fair, it's friendly. Low-income people will have more dollars to spend than they do now. Working families will have more money to spend. And government and school budgets will be fully funded. My concern is that if we end up going down the road of what we have now, Nebraska will change terribly. Small farmers, they'll have to leave. They can't afford to pay their property taxes. Mega rich people are going to come in and buy up the farm ground. Okay? Small towns, Holdridge will survive, but you get into smaller towns around here, they'll be ghost towns. Okay? Why? Because we've tried for 30 years to put a cap on spending. And what good has it done us? We're sitting here with the highest property taxes we've ever had to pay. Okay? Yeah, we got even on the state income tax a little bit, and now you got Governor Kim Reynolds in Iowa, and she's looking at reducing it again. So we're not staying current with our competition. We're getting beat. So I just want to thank each and every one of you, because we want to bring prosperity back to Nebraska. We don't want to see the small towns be ghost towns. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Brian, go ahead with your summary. You have 5 minutes.
And I'll be quick. Thank you for coming out tonight, whichever side you want to agree with. The fact that people come out from Nebraska to do this is why we're such a great state. And for those 49 senators down there, I was a business person who just started this career 6 years ago. I will tell you, I have a lot of respect for every one of the 49. They do it for no money. Most of them have to do medical insurance, end up writing a check to the state. With the privilege of being down there and doing this kind of stuff. But this is hard stuff. Senator Erdman has done an incredible amount of trying to develop this legislation and think it through and see the level of detail and stuff. My concern is the numbers just don't work. And it is an incredibly risky process for us. And more importantly, consumption taxes, sales taxes are an important part of any tax system. Every state has some. But to rely solely on this one base is risky also in a couple of other ways. One is one of the most volatile taxes. So as the economy goes up, we haven't had a recession, a big recession for a long time. But in a big recession, you will see sales taxes go like this. At that point in time, government will have to go like this and then go like this. Government's just generally not built to do that. Still going to have to provide the same social services to the same people. Secondly, I've heard me say many times tonight, I'm very worried about the regressive nature of sales taxes and the thought that we can just shift taxes from one group to another by becoming totally reliant on sales taxes. But it's really the young people that have most of the people starting out who don't own big houses. Most of us don't have money to own houses. Most of us don't own $5 million, $2 million apartment. Most of us are waiting. Pay taxes on our paycheck, we've got a modest house, and we do what we do, we got a bunch of kids. The problem with consumption taxes is your taxes increase if you have kids. For all of us who've had children, we know that our family expenses are directly proportional to how many children we have. Okay? We are a state that needs lots of children. And to tax people more because they have bigger families and they have more consumption is absolutely not what we need right now. We should be really proud of what we have. We have to work on that valuation. He's absolutely correct with the valuations he showed. We have to work on it. The governor has a bill in this session to require levies to come down at the same rate that valuations go up. Also, the $1,500 per student that we passed last year comes into effect this year. So a lot of the things that were passed last year, you won't see the effects until this year. And so you will see more property tax reduction. It's just the beginning, but we will get there. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. We have a couple of housekeeping things here. If you would like a survey, it would be appreciated to fill out. The surveys are in the back there. Next thing is the doors won't close until 9 o'clock. But our two speakers graciously said they would stick around here for a little while and answer any questions that maybe we didn't get to tonight. Thank you all for coming, and hopefully we've helped you rise above the noise that's out there.
One final thing I forgot to mention is there are yard signs if you'd like to take them and put them in your yard. They're on the back table. So you'll just need to take the metal base with you in addition to the sign. Thank you.